Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at what Florida could see this hurricane season. And obviously it's April 3rd, 2026. And I do have my camera on, but for some reason it only shows in this tab, but no biggie. So without further ado, let's get started. So first off, we're going to be looking at the Nino 3.4 index. And obviously what we see here is we are currently in a neutral. And so obviously, that's anything between zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius below or above. And so we're going into a positive ENSO phase. Now, what does this mean? So we're really going to be having potentially, cooler temperatures in the Atlantic, supposedly, if this goes into a full El Nino, and then warmer temperatures across the Atlantic. I do not think that's going to happen. People have been talking about some big super El Nino, and I do think it is possible we could get between 1 and 1.5 degrees Celsius above normal temperatures in the Pacific, which could potentially lead to cooler temperatures in parts of the Atlantic. But I don't think that's going to have a massive profound effect on the Atlantic hurricane season based on the models, which we'll go to in a second. But yeah, during the hurricane season, we can have anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5. And I'll try to show you all that towards the end. So yeah, but I don't think that's going to have a big effect on the Atlantic hurricane season, or at least not as big as it usually would. And I'm going to show you why. So if we go into the current Atlantic wide view right now and what we're going to be seeing, we do see that pretty normal temperatures across most of the Atlantic. We do have a cooler not Eastern Pacific, main development region, which I do think could be a signal on how this hurricane season is going to play out. Well, we do see a much warmer Gulf and Gulf Stream, and that definitely, if that would hold into the hurricane season, that could definitely show better development or strengthening chances for any systems going towards the United States. But we'll get to that in a second. So moving on to current sea surface temperatures. So the Caribbean is the warmest, around 27 degrees Celsius. So that's supportive of a tropical storm. We do have some areas in the Western Caribbean, 28 degrees Celsius. That's supportive towards more of a hurricane. Obviously, no low pressure systems right now. Nothing favorable right now for tropical development. It is too early, at least in the models. We don't see anything yet. Obviously, tropical thunderstorms are always possible, but nothing developed. As we see into the Gulf, we do have pockets of 26 degrees Celsius, which is favorable for tropical storms. Obviously, it's still early. It's going to get much warmer, but obviously that warm Gulf loop and the warmer Gulf Stream. The main development region, though, is sitting a little cooler, 24 and 25 degrees Celsius, which if we go back here, that's below average. So around up to a degree Celsius below average for the main development region, which could, if it holds into the hurricane season, could stunt a lot of development there. So obviously this video is about what specifically Florida could see this hurricane season. So we're going to have to talk about the activity, but also mainly about the track. So looking here, we do see this is the tropical tidbits TC frequency anomaly. So it takes the ENSO and ENSO forecast and looking at those tracks, it finds years similar to the current ENSO forecast and what tracks they had, and it shows if you have an above or below average chance of being impacted this year. These I'm not using all these analogs, and I will have other analogs, but this is just a good idea of what we could see. So obviously, below average hurricane season due to the El Nino, according to this. Then again, we'll get into the models and I'll show you why I disagree with it being this below average. But we do see Florida is at above average risk here. We'll also see the Carolinas and such. But mainly Florida we do see some tracks going into the West Panhandle. But a lot of these analogs, such as 2015, they do show a much cooler Atlantic waters, much higher shear in some of these analogs than what is forecasted for this year. And that's why some of these analogs that are more similar and don't just show a bunch of tropical depressions like some of these analogs show, I've cut out or I've kept, and the ones that just show tons of tropical depressions and insanely below average sea surface temperatures and insanely above average shear, they're cut out because that is not what is forecasted for this year. And we're going to see that now if we go into the models. So first, let's look at the CFS model. So looking at the CFS model, what we can see is for May, right before the season, above average precipitation near Florida and in and around the Gulf, and so that could potentially spur some short in development early on in the season. So, yeah, okay, sorry, I was checking that. Anyway, but as we go into the beginning of the season, June, same situation, below average precipitation for much of the area, but especially around Florida, we do see some pockets of above average, and that will stick into July. Now we do see this pocket of above average precipitation near Bermuda and near the Bahamas. So what that could mean is that a lot of these systems could be fish storms. They go off the coast and they don't really impact us very much. But as we go into the more peak season, August, September, we do see more pockets of above average precipitation near Florida, and that peaks in October as we see here. And yeah, and then obviously December is insanely above average, and that is due to the fact that we're going to be in a very strong El Nino by this point. Now, I would not call it a Godzilla El Nino like a lot of these people are saying. That's honestly no, but we do see even that above average precipitation going up into parts of the central United States. I don't think that's likely because it's an El Nino, and that usually limits it to like North Florida max. So while I do think that's a little excessive, yeah. But again, Godzilla El Nino, what we're ever calling it, I don't expect that. And in addition to that, the strongest El Nino will be past hurricane season. But we do see for towards the middle peak to a little later in the hurricane season, the Florida risk seems to be much higher. If we go into the NMME and we go into hurricane season, pretty average, so nothing we can see there. But as we get towards August, we do have above average precipitation signals in the northern Gulf and near Florida. And that holds into September, and same with October here. So again, really, as that El Nino gets stronger, again, I don't think it's going to be as strong as everybody's saying, but that El Nino, which also gives Florida a more active winter, could spur some more low development and low tracks near Florida, which could spur tropical storm and hurricane development there. So that definitely is something to watch out. I'm just gonna share the CANSTIPS real quick. They show above average precipitation for everywhere. Don't trust it because they always show the same thing. So I'm not gonna be using that. But is this CFS weekly? Yeah, no, I only watch CFS weekly. Just making sure. Yeah, okay, there we go. I'm looking at the right thing. Going to the shear anomalies. Also, look, I'm not going to be showing you the SST anomaly because look, it's the same thing. Above average temperatures for the whole Atlantic. So, in a lot of these analogs that show above average shear and below average temperatures for the entire Atlantic, so they just show very little development or only like tropical depressions forming. I cut out those analogs. Also analogs like 2015, where while we are both going to be an El Nino, that's the only thing we have similar, and otherwise it's not a big analog. But anyway, going into the 500 height anomaly, so this is showing where ridging and troughing can be stronger and weaker. Above average troughing, ridging, I meant, for a lot of pretty much the entire Atlantic. But we do see an interesting above average area near Newfoundland. There's Nova Scotia. No, that's Newfoundland. So what that could mean is that a lot of main development regions, they could be like swept. They not swept out. They could they could go out to sea here, especially because there's a little less of trough. There's a little less ridging here, and as y'all know, when a trough, this isn't a trough, this is a ridge, but when a trough, that's the blue colors, comes, it likes to sweep away, likes to sweep the system away. And so what that could mean is that because there's a lower pressure here, obviously higher pressure pushes away systems there, but a high pressure will curve a system away from something, but a low pressure I mean, it goes into there. So what that could mean is that a lot of these MDR systems, at least early on, might just care about the sea. Now, or what I'm interpreting this as. Now, nothing interesting until we really get to the later season. Wait, that's not the season. So what we see is more ridging here over the West Atlantic. Sorry, that took East Atlantic. Sorry, that took me a second. But so that still does push recurvatures. So just based on say main development region systems, not a very favorable looking for Florida. Now we could always have a system like Irma, which is one of our analogs that goes like that, but that would definitely, obviously, it would require more close in development. So that we definitely could see that. But I do think, based on those precipitation anomalies, which I did show you, a lot of the development will be close in. So, looking at the NMME, we're saying on CFS Weekly, sorry. If we go into the shear anomaly, real quick, we do see below average shear for the area near Florida. I mean, again, main development region, not favorable at all. But towards the Gulf and Yucatan, we could see a lot of systems, especially with that above average precipitation, forming short in. And with warmer Gulf Loop waters. Sorry, I said that wrong. That, especially the Gulf Loop, even in an El Nino year, they could stir rapid development like in Hurricane Michael 2018, which is one of our analogs. We could even see a bigger risk for Florida this year. So that's why, even with this moderate to strong El Nino that could happen, again, I still think people are exaggerating it, but even then, we could see a much higher Florida risk. And going to the TSR forecast, that is reflected here. Like a strong El Nino, yes, but 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes, and a 125 ACE index. So a pretty average season. And according to the 30-year Atlantic norm, it's slightly above average. And looking towards the analog years, which we do see here, we do see 2011, 2017, and 2018. They mentioned 2018 right here. So again, for example, the 2018 Hurricane Michael formed in a Central American gyre, and it traveled over the Gulf, rapidly intensified, even though it was formed pretty close to the United States, and it still became a very strong system. So just because these systems are close in doesn't mean by any means they're going to be weak. Again, some of them could be, or likely going to be on the weaker side, tropical storms. Weak, relatively speaking, because even tropical storms are strong. But yeah, but I'm just showing some of them could be stronger, like major hurricane systems, like we saw in 2017. But yeah, and also for ENSO, there is limited confidence for warm neutral ENSO conditions to be in place through midsummer and autumn. So again, we don't even know how strong this El Nino is going to be. There's going to be an El Nino most likely, but it could also just wait to form into the later season. Did I accidentally put that twice? Yeah, I accidentally put that twice. Soups. But anyway, first analog. This is just an order of years. So we're going to look at the analogs now. I can't use the pen on this. But by the way, 1982 is our first analog. Now, this is a very inactive analog, but it was one of the highest in terms of ENSO similarity. So I'm going to show it here. So obviously, this is 1982. This was in a cool season. So Atlantic hurricane seasons have cool and warm seasons. We're in a warm season now. This was a cool season, so it was just relatively inactive any year. But we do see a South Florida risk here and a Central American gyre, which could push systems out Florida. And then we have something going through the Big Bend and a lot of out-to-sea systems, which was shown by that weaker ridging and the troughing out in the North Atlantic, which could curve systems away. So nothing too crazy there. 1984, a little bit more active. 1994, sorry. A little bit more active in terms of tropical storms. Again, less major hurricanes, though I do think we'll see a relatively average year for hurricanes and major hurricanes. We do see, again, this is a big one because, again, we have some recurvatures, but we also have South Florida risk and big panhandle and big Ren risk here. Again, they're all tropical storms, but that's still something you need to watch. From tropical storms all the way up to major hurricanes, everything can bring you a notable risk. So that definitely shows how we really could be watching for the Central American gyre, and also just those above average precipitation anomalies and below average shear to bring systems to Florida. 1997 is our next one. Again, a lot of recurvatures. This one isn't a Florida risk, but it does show Gulf development, and it also shows rapidly intensifying Gulf development. As we see here, it formed literally right off the Louisiana coast and somehow became a hurricane before landfall. So while I don't, so that could mean that we have systems like that. They form in. If we go back, form close in. If we go back to the precipitation anomaly, we have very close in precipitation anomalies, but that could, and even more as we go into the later season, which definitely could spur more development risks for Florida. 2011, again, a lot of stuff in the Gulf close in. Nothing for Florida this year, and more out to sea systems. I don't think we'll have something like this year, due to the proportion of out to sea systems versus the lack of Gulf areas. But again, still many systems in the Gulf. Now, the two main analogs, the main analogs I'm going to show now are 2017 and 2018. So 2017, very active. I don't think we'll see as active this year, and I don't think the systems will be as strong. But we do have systems forming near the Northern Caribbean that go towards Florida. They might not hit Florida, but they go towards Florida. We have a little south of the Big Bend, but we do have a tropical storm risk here. And then we have a South Florida and Big Bend risk with Hurricane Irma. And then in 2018, the best example, again, a little bit of troughing up here, so tons of out to sea systems. But again, one still manages to get to the Carolinas. But here's what I want to focus on. Look, we have a South Florida risk due to close in development from tropical storm. I think it was Alberto. And then we have Central American Gyre forming two tropical storms. One hits near Panama City. And then we have another one, Hurricane Michael, which obviously I can't say we're going to have Hurricane Michael this year. Obviously, it depends on the specific setup at the time. But the Central American Gyre, those above average precipitation anomalies and below average shear, shows something. Again, Central American Gyre, low pressure system in the Gulf, and potentially stronger systems due to those warm Gulf loop waters and rapid intensification. Now we're going to look at another forecast. So we're going to look at WESH here. So, okay, usually they show the low pressure systems here, but they do have above average landfall hotspot for the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend. How they do their methodology is they look at the previous winter or something, and they look at the low pressure systems tracked, and they see like where they have gone. So the low pressure system tracks are something like this. So they show Gulf development, but also they've been pretty accurate, 80-90%, and this shows that there's strong signals for Florida getting something this year, especially with those low pressure systems being in a lot in this area during the winter time and previous fall. And they are showing a below average season, 9 to 13, 4 to 6 hurricanes, 1 to 3 major hurricanes. I am not denying that we'll see a below average season. I think it's very possible. I don't think it'll be this low, but I do think we'll be having a below average season. But due to the anomalies around Florida, I don't think Florida is going to have a below average risk. Going into the tropical storm frequency, again, we are seeing an average year this is up to September, by the way. So more tropical storms are going to form than this, but we can see that there is not an insane signal showing a very inactive year. Models like the ECMWF do show notable tropical storm development up to September, so these numbers will go up, obviously, but not a below average season. Now for hurricanes, yes, and I can kind of see why. I mean, you saw that above average shear all across the main development region. If we go back here, so obviously those long track systems like Hurricane Irma, while Hurricane Irma is in one of our analog years, obviously with that above average shear here, it's going to be harder for those long track, stronger hurricanes and tropical cyclones to form. But it's still possible for a place like Florida. I mean, you saw it in like Hurricane Michael. And this is too early. This is the seasonal forecast standardized tropical storm density, so where tropical storms can form. We don't have any anomalies yet for Florida because we're just in white. We're not in producing usual or expected because it is too early in this year for it to pick up anything. But I will definitely keep y'all updated with this. And we do see something in the southeast, so that could definitely. And again, you saw a lot of systems coming from Florida and going out in this region. Here, let me see if I can find one. You see like one right here in 1982. So that could definitely mean that we do have systems in the Gulf going into this region. So that could mean above average Gulf activity this year. Now, last thing I want to show you is the seasonal forecast for the ENSO, if I can find it. Yeah. So this is showing a very big strong El Nino, but we are still on the lower end of the forecast. And if we go to the peak season, we're still at 1.5. So really, Godzilla El Nino or whatever, I really doubt it. But even if we were to see it, it would not be during the hurricane season. But I really doubt it's going to be that strong. And if we can see that here, look, the average is less than 2 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius above. So I don't think the El Nino is going to have a profound effect, as big of an effect on Florida due to the anomalies, but also just because I don't think it's as strong as people are saying. But anyway, the overview. Because of the Florida anomalies and what we're going to be seeing there, like the above average precipitation, below average here and such, and obviously with like the low pressure systems in autumn and winter going towards Florida, I do think we'll see an above average risk for Florida, especially the Big Bend in South Florida. 2 to 3 tropical storms landfalling. I mean, you saw it in like 2018, for example. 2018, by the way, it was an average year in terms of activity for the most part. I mean, it was a little bit above average, but still, we see in these years many tropical storms hitting Florida. Even in like the weaker years, like 1982, you see 1 or 2 hitting, especially in 1994, where you have like 4 there. So, but 2 to 3 tropical storm landfalling are affecting Florida with tropical storm impacts, but they might not make landfall. It might skim it. But yeah, 1 hurricane or major hurricane landfalling are affecting Florida. Low pressure systems near the Yucatan, Southern Gulf, and Northern Caribbean will be the biggest threat, obviously, and those anomalies, like I was saying, lower cheer. Favorable steering, again, with those low pressure systems that Wes was talking about, and yeah, stuff like that, and the warmer Gulf waters will favor that. And an extra, no matter what, Florida will be at risk, especially the peninsula, to tropical lows and tropical thunderstorms. So this isn't related to the tropical systems themselves, but it's something we're going to be seeing. And then this is my overall forecast for the year. Again, we had some systems like Irma and even some tropical storms coming out from like near the Bahamas going into southern Florida, as well as some from the Yucatan. And then obviously the Big Bend and Panhandle, we saw many tracks like that, such as Michael, Tropical Storm Alberta. So yeah, definitely going to be watching all that. But that's going to be it for this video. If you haven't seen my hurricane season forecast, I posted about 2 weeks ago, my landfall forecast for the entire area, the entire United States and the entirety of the Caribbean too. Go watch that. I covered everything there. Like I had landfall maps for all areas. For U.S. and non-U.S. hotspots. So if you want a little more in-depth on that, or you want areas outside of Florida, go check that out, especially, and also for my numbers, my specific hurricane season numbers, and more in depth on the actual activity itself, go to check out those videos. And I will be posting my next hurricane season update either tomorrow, Sunday, or next weekend. So stay updated for that. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have, and have a great day.